I use any excuse that I can to include music from Spark the Electric Jester in my videos. The game was lovingly crafted by LakeFeperd, who I became aware of through his fan game works, Sonic before the sequel, after the sequel, and the Metroidvania Sonic Chrono Adventure. Since then, he's carved his own path in commercial indie game development with the release of Spark the Electric Jester, and the recent release of its sequel, which makes the jump to 3D. I've been fascinated by his use of fan games as a springboard towards professional development, and I had the opportunity to ask him some questions regarding that transition. The Sonic fan game scene he hails from has thrived for over 2 decades, and I wanted to find out why so many people are involved with fan projects for this series.
I think it's because of a general dissatisfaction with the series. They start making them because they just want to make, they want a Sonic maker. They want to make a little Sonic level. So there's still people who make Sonic games, they want to make a game like Sonic 06, and they want to do it better. And there's a lot of games like that. So in general, I think it's either for fun or because of a dissatisfaction of the series.
I was also interested in the early days of Spark 1's development, and how that related to his work on fan games.
I've always wanted to make my own game, ever since the beginnings of Sonic before the sequel. And by the time I was making before the sequel, I pretty much realized, oh yeah, I enjoy making games. So I kind of want to pursue a career in this. I think it was back in after the sequel itself, with the concept of being Sonic, that I've realized, maybe I could make this into an original character. So as far as I remember, that's pretty much how Spark got its inception. And then from then onwards, I started drawing the character, thinking about the universe, and there was plenty of iterations that went past. And when I was working on Sonic Chrono Adventure, which was my third and final fan game, I was already working on Spark, so I already had a little beta build of Spark, or a little test level working while I was working on Chrono Adventure.
So then, when you were making Spark, did you have to change your approach to game design compared to when you were working on Sonic fan games? And how do you deal with that issue of I want to make a game that's like this, but I want to make my own thing. I don't want to make something that's just exactly the same as Sonic. I want to make my own thing.
I actually felt like I had to make Spark more like Sonic. I had to implement more Sonic elements into it, because when I started, immediately I already wanted it to be very different, and I felt like I had to work backwards in that sense. I had to introduce loops back into the game because they weren't really there. Spark was very much a slow action, Mega Man type of game, and then I decided, you know what, this is kind of boring. I want to make it faster. I sped up the game significantly. The original version of Spark is, it's terrible. It's slow. It looks like trash. And that game had to have changed itself a lot before it became what is known today. That game was pretty much a game made without any plans. And that was one of its biggest flaws, really. But somehow I managed to mix that into a package that it's reasonably consistent.
Spark 1 was developed on ClickTeam Fusion, the same engine as his fan games, albeit a newer version. Fusion uses visual programming to mostly bypass the learning spike that many new developers encounter with code-based programming. So I asked him what the strengths and limitations of the engine meant for Spark.
ClickTeam Fusion itself is a very simple game-making engine, and because it's so simple, it strips down a couple of things that make it much easier. Basically, there's many things that it does that are not good. It's let's say, you want to port it to a console. Well, you can't. You need to work. You need to hire someone, a third party, in order to do it for you, and it's not exactly the cheapest thing in the world. That's why Spark couldn't really see console ports.
From there, we discussed getting Spark 1 off the ground, as well as how other fan game developers have found commercial success, such as with the Sonic Mania team.
At least the Kickstarter itself was, at least to me, the hardest part, because setting up a Kickstarter is very hard. There's plenty of things that I really don't want to go on about, but then there's also the anxiety of the game getting funded or not. It's hard to get your game funded. It's not easy, but I did manage it, thankfully. If that Kickstarter failed, I don't know where I would be today. I would probably have canceled Spark. It wouldn't have happened, and it would have worked on just a different game. Yeah, Christian Whitehead himself did start by doing simple stuff. Quote unquote simple stuff, like the ports of Sonic 1 and 2 to mobile. And Sonic CD, I think he did Sonic 1, I'm not really sure, but he did 2.
I think he did Sonic 1 and 2, the mobile one.
Him and the people who made Mania had a pretty good track record. I mean, Pagoda West already had a published game in the form of Major Magnet, so they definitely had something to pitch. They weren't just some fan game makers who have made something that kind of looks impressive, but they haven't published anything. They don't have, let's say, industry experience or anything like that. No, those guys did have experience. This mentality that a lot of people have in the Sonic fan community, I've seen this plenty of times, almost everywhere, is that a lot of people who make Sonic fan games, they want to, like, quote unquote, work for Sega, like make an official Sonic game. Personally, I think that's a bad idea. I don't really want to work for Sega personally. At least that's my view on it. I don't want to work for a big company.
Is that a solo project then, or are you working with other people now on like Spark 2?
I mean, I'm working with people for the music and the art on the title screen, not the title screen, the menu screen. Mostly, aside from some coding help here and there from some people that I ask help with. Just like, oh, I don't know how to do this thing. Do you know how to do it? And they send me like a couple lines of code, like a function. Yeah, mostly alone. All the models are made by me, pretty much all textures and 3D models, stages, all programming is pretty much by me, except for, you know, the help that I receive.
So then when you were working on Spark, was that like, once it was funded, was that a full-time project, or were you balancing other stuff with it?
Well, kinda. I've always, like, back then I was still in college, so I couldn't really, I had to do it at the same time as whatever college projects I was working at the time. Yeah, it wasn't possible for me to make it full-time, but it was as full-time as I could make it out to be. So I worked on it as much as I possibly could during that time. Now that it's over, now that college has been over, it's been over for a couple of years now, I can pretty much work on those full-time, and I couldn't have asked for anything better. Thank God. Whatever development time I add more to it, it would just be, it's just polish, it's just fixing things here and there, but there's only so many times I can play my own game before my head explodes, you know, like more often than not when I get close to the end of development, I'm like, holy hell, I played this game like 100 times from beginning to end, over and over and over again, and I am done. I want to release this already.
I never want to see it again.
Yeah, I mean, when you have testers, they can do that for you, but all the times there's some things that only you can really test out and figure it out for yourself, because you can't really know if everything is working when you have unpaid testers, because a lot of times they're not going to finish the whole game, and that's understandable. I mean, I'm not paying them to finish it. So I just have to do the work myself, and it is hard. You have to step on every single platform, and then sometimes you're going to find, oh, I forgot I'd collision to this one, and you fall through it. So that's a thing you have to always consider. You have to step on everything, you have to test every enemy, you have to go everywhere in the stage. And you have to, you know, also do all of the objectives that you have to do in the stage in every possible order. Sometimes you have to play through the entire stage and then go back all the way through and then come back again to notice if anything breaks when you do that. Because someone's gonna do that.
I found this particularly amazing. I'd never considered just how much development time is dedicated to testing and bug fixes, and just how much of a burden that work would be for a solo developer. It's perhaps no surprise that indie projects often take years longer to complete than anticipated.
It's just that in a lot of cases of a lot of indie projects, the indie project is not the main project. It's like a secondary thing. Back on the days of Sonic after the sequel, the game was delayed for several months until the music was done. And what's unfortunate is that our musicians are very busy themselves. Working on Spark 2 isn't like their main gig. So it's like it's something they do on the side, and because of that, it just takes quite a long time for them to finish a song, and that's fine. This is how it works. It shouldn't really be like a case that we have to delay the game because of the music. It's really management on my part. I have to be the one that commissions those songs as soon as I possibly can. It's just that in this game, I really couldn't do that. But fortunately now I can actually publish the game with the current scenario that we are right now. When you said before the extra development time, well, it's not development time, it's waiting time. And back in after the sequel, I was already working on something else while the soundtrack was being made. So it's not really about what development time, it's like the game's done, it's finished.
At this point, I wanted to find out more about Spark 2's development. The game was developed on the Unity engine, and it's his first 3D game that he's put up for sale, though it turns out it's not the first game that he's made in Unity.
Since the beginning, since my beginning of my game design career, I've always been practicing with Blender 3D modeling software and Unity. So I've always had I picked up Unity a bit later, but I've always been messing with things that are above what I used to do. I always knew Blender, so much so that some of the enemies in Spark 1 are pre-rendered 3D models, and people haven't noticed them thankfully, but it's because I hand painted the shading on them so it wouldn't look as bad. Yeah, but I've always been dabbling in those sorts of software. So really, even before I released Spark, there was a period in college where I sort of lost faith in the idea of Spark. This is before the Kickstarter, and I decided, you know what, I'm gonna make a game on Unity. So I made XF, which is a little weird racing game where you don't really race anyone but the clock. That game's art style, XF's art style, was pretty much the what set in motion Spark 2's art style. And then when I started working on Spark 2, I made this engine called Hedge Physics, which I published it, and I've always had this idea that I wanted to make a 3D Sonic engine because I didn't feel like there was a 3D Sonic engine made public at the time, and I've been dabbling with it for a very, very long time, since the beginnings of college. And what really motivated me to actually work on Spark 2 was that I got a 3D Sonic game engine ready, and was like, I could use this for my original game. So I decided, you know what, I think I'm gonna make this an original game. So I went and did it, and that's how Spark 2 started. Pretty much learned how to make Unity games by making XF and whatever college project I was working on at the time.
So your college course was related to game development, was it?
It was, but it wasn't the college project itself that taught me how to use Unity. It taught me a couple of things, but it wasn't really the college itself that actually taught me. I kind of just had to struggle through with myself and figure it out. I mean, the first XF, what happened exactly? I think I was introduced to Unity, had the first lesson where they just pretty much taught me the UI, and then a week later, I just fucking bring a demo of XF, and I throw it in the class, and me and my friends are playing it, and they're having a lot of fun. It took me quite a lot of time to work on it and get it right. It's a process that might take years for a lot of people, and that's fine, but it's just how it is. You have to work really, really hard on that and just figure it out.
From the trailers and demos for Spark 2, it seems like the story is taking a slightly different approach. And in asking about this change, I discovered one of LakeFeperd's greater ambitions in games development. I have this game that I have in mind that has been planned for a very, very long time, although I'm really not sure if it will actually ever happen. But I had it planned for a very, very long time, and Spark 2 is... yeah, it's pretty much a kind of a gap between this game I have planned and the original Spark. And I think it also introduces a different take on the plot itself in a way, because previously it was focused on Spark himself, and Spark isn't exactly a serious character, right? He has a really silly goal, and he's going through this silly world and this silly adventure. But in this time with Fark, I wanted to have a character who has a more serious goal. I got the sort of Sonic Adventure 2 feel, which is exactly what I like from a game, which is it's serious, but it's not it's got a bit of that sort of action movie cheese to it, which makes it really enjoyable, instead of super, super grim, dark, and serious. I wanted to make it as cheesy.
I wanted to make it as cheesy as I could. It was my goal with it.
That is amazing to hear. That makes me so happy. Finally, I asked him what advice he had for anyone looking into making fan games or making their first commercial product.
I would say work as hard as you possibly can. You really got nothing to lose by working hard. You will only stand to learn more and more about whatever you want to make. Just keep working on it. Keep getting better at what you're doing, and it's going to take several years. I mean, it took 7 for me. It's no joke. It took a very long time for me. But eventually, I think you'll be able to manage it and have something good that you can show to other people. But you just have to keep working on it. Don't give up. Work on it as hard as you can, and try to make something that people are interested in.
So, thank you for your answers and for your time today.
That's fine.
So, when does Spark 2 release, and is there anything that you want to let people know about the game who may be interested in picking it up?
Releases on 16th of May, and play with a controller. That's it. You can play with a keyboard, but I don't recommend it.
That's good advice. Okay, so real talk, in order to keep this video relevant to the topic, I had to cut a lot of really interesting stuff from this interview. LakeFeperd spoke in more detail about the development of his games, Sega's policies on fan games and outsourced projects, the likelihood of console versions for Spark 2, and the impact of age ratings on the game. As such, I'll be uploading the full interview to this channel in a few days' time. Thank you LakeFeperd for the interview opportunity, it was a lot of fun.